Hello, everyone. I am Mike from Inside the Pylons, and this is technically going to be our launch for In the Den. And In the Den is all about the Michigan Panthers. I am glad to be joined today by Zach Keilman over at USFL Podcast and Inside the Walls podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, glad to be here, man. Appreciate the time, Mike. And you know, it's season's kind of fast approaching, dude. Panthers have a lot going on. And I'm glad to get jumping into it.
Me too. So recently, USFL had the college draft, and there's some big names that you guys picked up. And I just thought maybe we could just talk about the big key picks that you guys made. For me personally, the biggest one that I notice when looking at the list is a second round pick, Tanner Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on Mr. Morgan?
Well, I'll tell you. First caveat with this draft is college draft. Keep in mind it's about college player rights, so none of these guys have officially signed. But if I'm looking at Tanner Morgan, the player is in. Do I see him as a future prospect that the league could look at and is good for like Mike Nolan to pick up? I like those odds. I think Morgan, he's one that earlier on in his college career at Minnesota, he got a lot of eyeballs on him for his performances. Kind of had some things fizzle out in his last two seasons at for the Gophers, but he's someone that will take his looks. I just think that he'll be possibly available later on and could be somebody that definitely could take this avenue into the sport. So if you're the Panthers, in terms of future roster building, I like his game. I think he's been an underrated Big Ten quarterback in recent years, and is somebody that if you're stockpiling or possibly having as a potential, I guess, piece of weaponry for your team in future seasons, that's a guy I like. No doubt about it. I think it was a good pickup. And again, I value these picks in terms of guys that either they are going to be UDFA designation for NFL draft, so they won't be picked up, or they don't get picked up in that section, or they're late round picks in the NFL draft. Morgan fits that mold where he definitely, I think, needs some pro tape and experience outside of just his college pro experience and some pro days. And I think he could excel going to the USFL, getting some time like that. So that pickup was really solid. I was a big fan of that because I could very likely see him, I think, in the next year or two, maybe making the jump if he wants to, and the Panthers having those rights ready to go.
Yes, it's funny you mentioned that because I know, I think it was yesterday or today, Malik Willis was talking to the media at the combine, and he said basically in a clean way, screw the USFL. I'm not playing for a league if it's not the NFL. And it from what he said, he mentioned also that he didn't even know that he had gotten drafted because the team nor anyone in the league had been in touch with him. So, I mean, I guess not specifically Cunningham because he's not a draft pick by Michigan, but what
Sure.
do you think of the league or leagues like the USFL making this kind of mistake?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's a mistake. So a lot of these guys, they understood, and Jim Pop mentioned this in conversations that he's had with others that have interviewed him, that they know a lot of these guys aren't going to the USFL. That's just pure fact. And I think Cunningham, maybe he wasn't contacted, maybe he was. I'm not sure at the time. I know he's saying he wasn't contacted, but I think that they're, if you're looking at him getting picked up, it's more just in case. Like, hey, we maybe you're hedging your bets on a player. Like, hey, we believe that if you can't make it in the NFL, because the USFL wants these guys to get to the NFL, but if they can't, we're ready to go for you. Like, you have an avenue. You don't have to sit on the sidelines and worry about doing tryouts and maybe you get a tryout and then you get maybe a futures deal. No, you can come play. Like that's what that's all about. Even if it is going to be for less money than an NFL deal for most cases. So, I think, for Cunningham's quote, I know it came off like, yeah, I was working out and I just happened to get a notification about this and stuff. Like, sure, it seems a little awkward if you're maybe an NFL or football fan, but like, realize that this was the intention all along. Like, I don't think anyone was going in, like Zach Potter for the Birmingham Stallions was going in and assuming, yeah, I'm gonna land Malik Cunningham. Like, I'm guaranteed to get him. Like, no, because it wasn't bound to happen. Like, same thing for Steve Kaiser if we're talking Tanner Morgan. I don't think he's believing Tanner Morgan's going to sign. Do I think that maybe he picked him up and saying, I think Morgan could sign in like maybe the next year or so? Yeah, totally. So these are that's like a hedge bet type of pick. Morgan, Cunningham, those guys, I think you're a GM hedging your bets and saying, I buy a fact that in the future, this guy could be on my roster and would be totally worth it if he does it. So they understand going in. And that quote, it's fine. It's understandable. I get it. I ain't knocking him for it. He's going to the NFL first. That's what he wants to do. And a lot of players, they're not going to be shying away. They want the NFL opportunity first and foremost.
So, because we know overall this draft was very historical. We had 12 HBCU players. We had a lot of Division II, Division III, NAIA players. So for the players that they majority took, and you can kind of describe this with some of the guys that you took, but do you think that they went too far, so to speak? Like they got a few of the guys that are like, I don't really think he's going to sign, but they mostly went the route that they did just so that the draft can still be productive and interesting. Because, if you're looking at the HBCU guys, the NAIA Division II, Division III guys, to me, those are guys that are like, we're drafting them because we need the spot filled, and we know they're not going to get a chance in the NFL yet.
Well, I get what you're saying. Keep in mind, these rosters already all these picks don't affect the rosters for training camp. So that is something that it's very much for next year roster building or year prior or mid-season if they need to, say someone comes available and they want to switch them out. That's what that's for, So these to me, like those picks, I get your point where you're like, maybe I'm picking just to get some guys that I might think join. For example, Gunnar Oaks. I thought he's a guy that at a tight end position where, remember, Joey Magnifico, he's not with the Panthers anymore. He is off to actually help with the Memphis Tigers and get into a coaching kind of pathway. I think he's a guy that if he wanted to take his draft of the USFL, he would do it. Eastern Michigan kid, so you're going to be able to play locally where you were already in Ypsilanti is just up the road, which is where the Panthers are going to sound like be training anyway. That's someone I think from his perspective that he might take that. But I think, like I said, a lot of this is just it's hedging future bets. They already have, for the most part, the Panthers already have their majority roster sans maybe a third quarterback. But other than that, totally future placement. Maybe a few you might think come in. Like I said, Gunnar Oaks fits that bill to me, hands down. Or maybe some of these later round guys they picked up, like say like a Chim Okorafor or City. So like those guys I could see maybe perhaps they don't get picked up. They go. But like the early round guys, like say a Jarrett Horst, a Tanner Morgan, they're going to have NFL futures first. So you expect that. But like it all depends. Like I said, it's going to come down to later in the year if they want post-draft, which remember the NFL draft is taking place early on in the USFL season. So a lot of these guys, they won't declare because they want to see what their draft stock is first. So a lot of it's next year. You got to think next year with that priority. But I think, to me, I would love to see like Gunnar Oaks to me. I want him on the roster hopefully by midseason if he wants to. Because they need that spot at tight end. So,
because of where the draft takes place, do you like USFL having this style of draft. I know I watched some of the draft live stream, and I believe you guys kind of touched on it, you and Ref, that like basically it's just kind of stuck where it is, because if you have it after the NFL draft, you're already in the season, so now it makes absolutely no sense. If you want it to make sense, then you have to push the start of the season back. And then if you push the start of the season back, you almost have to shorten the season, because if you keep it the same length, you're now running into NFL preseason, the beginning of college football. You're basically taking eyes away from your league. So do you think, even though the system is kind of stuck where it is, do you think this is a good system for USFL?
I think for right now, it's the best they have available. So spring football, this is more, I think, a general spring football question rather than just a USFL question, because you're going to see even the XFL, they're going to probably think about this for drafting and players' rights and all this stuff that's going to be for future bets. And I think right now it doesn't seem like there's a possibility you can say, well, maybe we move it past the year, like mid-year, or at the end of the NFL draft. But here's my thing. You're leveraging for what could be later on down the line if you keep this league going. So the more you show to, I think, agents, to prospects that are coming out in football, that maybe are saying, you know what, spring football does have a place and it's stable. They know it's a stable option, and it's a guaranteed option to help you get more film and better looked at from agents and also scouts. Later on, I think this draft will help have more guys that say, maybe I'll bypass the NFL option and take this if they want. Right now, they're not. Again, it's year 2 of the USFL. Spring football still has that mantra of, well, it's not going to succeed. It needs to show its worth, and that's going to stick around. It has that viability structure, and it will not collapse. So at this time, this is the best option, and I think it's leveraging what could be best for the future as well. If anything, maybe if they wanted to say in later seasons, I don't know, perhaps they want to do a draft beginning of the year. Maybe not like, maybe they want to go even earlier in the year than they did prior. Not February, but like maybe they do January, where later years they get more established. They have more draft picks that do indeed come out. Maybe you get that earlier on so that it's not, having to be, say, in future seasons, like 2 months, it's 3 months out, and you get more time to get, like, say, eventually maybe someday rookie OTAs or things like that, or rookie training camps where they can come in and kind of get those packages down, But right now, where spring football's saying this is your best option, I think. You can do it at the end of the season or after the draft, but I think for exposure, for people's interest, and for players to kind of get recognized and have that path to be like, okay, I have this option in my back pocket. This is your best solution, I think, right now, is during this late winter season.
That makes sense. So other than Tanner Morgan and Gunnar Oaks, do any of the other Michigan draft picks stand out to you?
Well, I mean, Horst, if he was coming out, I think that'd be great, because the Panthers, any team, but especially the Panthers, I think could add on some talented linemen, to help, of course, with pass pro and all that. I think also I liked Andrew Farmer as well, came out of Lane College. I'll give him plenty of nods. I thought he was a pretty solid pickup. Smaller school guy, but someone that has the accolades to back it up. So definitely it. And again, I think any lineman picks, getting futures for linemen is massive for these drafts, because again, you can find skill guys out the wazoo in any level. Even quarterbacks, I know that good quarterbacks play does help, and it is massive, but the best way to facilitate and to nurture good quarterback play is to get good linemen. So, spring football, the best teams get the situational linemen figured out the fastest. So having not just Horst, but picking up later round guys, like said Jim Okafor, City So, DJ Schaaf, who also had accolades. Like, these pickups are big pickups. Levi Bell also, I like Levi Bell as an option too from the 5th round. I did have good praise for him as well coming out. So to me, the lineman picks are ones for this draft that I think give me the best aspects of what teams are doing. Like, Michigan didn't lean in as much as this, but Philadelphia, Bart Anderson Company, with Woods, they did a ton of linemen. And I think that was a great choice because they saw their team and they went, well, we got a lot of skill guys right now, and we can probably retool if we need to for some of these guys that don't stick around. But we could definitely, and they saw last year after getting Case Cookus completely, beaten up and kind of taking his shots all year, even though he was excelling with it. They want to make sure in future years that their front seven or front five in particular on the offensive side isn't going to get beaten up. They have those options to sign people. That's a smart play, in my opinion, for spring football. So I like that. So the Panthers, I think lineman choices, having those as well, sprinkled in with just some of the options, like I said, Morgan being a potential to come over there maybe in a year or two, or like Gunnar Oaks. Those are my guys, without a doubt. The top ones I got to look at this draft and say I'd take those away as people that I have high hopes to come to the Panthers someday.
Definitely. I think that's been noticed as the key with the draft is just mostly people are, even though it's really not for this year, people are like drafting in preparation.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. I mean, it's all about prep. That's the thing. It's a very much prep and future building aspect to it, So I definitely look at it that way. And again, I mean, lineman picks. Like I said, Levi Bell. I love that pickup, and I think that hasn't been talked about enough. We're talking, a 2022 All Sun Belt second team, All Sun Belt first team as well for Pro Football Focus, as well as an All American third team for Pro Football Focus. Like, dude's had his accolades. Dude's an underrated Sun Belt Conference talent from Texas State. So, I'll add that nod to add on because I did say I liked him, but I just want to make sure to reiterate I do really like this kid, and that's someone that maybe could be available. Again, future building. It's what this draft is mainly about. It's about making sure you have a talent resource pool that you can pull from if they want to come in and play. Those are your guys are ready to go, and you can have rights to them right out of the gate when they sign a USFL contract.
Let's see. So in this offseason, Michigan got rid of Jeff Fisher and brought in Mike Nolan. I know you and Ref talked about it on the podcast, which is awesome. Everyone should go check it out. How do you feel about both moves? I know you've had some time to dwell on it. You've talked about it to no end, I'm sure. But since it's happened and you've had some time to process, what are your thoughts on both sides?
Well, okay. So, I mean, Fisher, got to keep in mind, Fisher chose to step down. And, a lot of his basis when he put out his quote about why he's moving on came down to, he realized last year he has a family he wants to be a part of. And, he's a granddad. He's got grandkids he wants to visit. He's got kids that he wants to visit. And that I think he found his avenue for still expressing his football itch. Remember, he did the NFL PA Bowl with Eddie George. And to me, I think that decision I think that experience to me, I think that highlights what he wants even more so is that, like, what can I do that I can still do football things and I can still be that football guy to kind of give back to the football community, but also to where I can balance my life. And I think that's what he decided is after that season, plus with like the travel and everything plus with the travel he had going back and forth from his home to Birmingham and, being in the hub. I think that's what his decision was. This is somewhat speculation, but it's kind of what I gather just thinking about the timeline of his past offseason for Jeff. Mike Nolan being a pickup, fascinating one for the fact that he has had so many stops in the NFL in terms of just defensive coordinator gigs, as well as being all over the place in terms of a defensive-minded head coach. Something that the Panthers definitely desperately needed last year was to up the ante just to be able to stop offenses from just adding gobbles of yards come the end of the year. I mean, I still remember the Philadelphia Stars just laying out Michigan come the end of the season. And so I think that pickup, some folks in the NFL community have some knocks on him, but I think this is a great avenue for him to get back into the game. So far in his local hits that he's been on, he sounds thrilled to be doing this. I think he's a guy that the league wants to have, where it's like either trying to get back in or has, I think, he has the pedigree, but he has the pedigree in terms of the name recognition, but he's looking to actively get a restart and is definitely someone that wants to jump in and use this level and get out of the NFL noise. So, I like Nolan for those sakes, and he seems to have embraced the Michigan market so far and have been getting involved. So, yeah, I'm a fan of this move, and I think a lot of Panthers fans so far, from what I've talked to, they seem to like it. Having that defensive-minded guy, they kept on Eric Marty as their offensive coordinator, which, if you look at the metrics for the Panthers, they're offensively, yardage-wise, they're pretty damn good. They just needed to put things together more consistently, and they do get to keep that sustained. Remember, they're bringing back Reggie Corbin, they're bringing back they're bringing back Stevie Scott, they're bringing back their two quarterbacks that were playing at their best level. Sans Paxton Lynch come the end of the year. I mean, Eric Berrier had a lot of people excited in their second matchup against the Generals. Josh Love, when he came in from the trade from the Maulers, up until he had basically got knocked out with injury, he looked like he was going to be the solution for Michigan. So, and then depending on who they pick up as a third QB, if they do for camp, I like where they're at. And I think Nolan, they kept the right people. They had some people leave, but they adjusted and have changed out who's needed. And I like where Michigan's at right now. Still some questions. A lot of pickups defensively. It's gonna have to be a lot of retooling, and hopefully that defense takes a step forward this season. Because if they can just take any amount forward, they can definitely, to me, win more than just 2 football games this year. So Nolan to me was a good pickup. Fisher, I understood completely. It's a life decision first that has to come first for him, and I think he found, in my eyes, the best balance to do what he wanted to do in the first place.
That makes sense. So, when we look back at 2022 for Michigan, my main focus tends to be at the quarterback position, like a lot of people.
Sure.
Do you feel like you regret that Michigan picked up who they picked up between Shea Patterson and Paxton Lynch?
Well, I mean, I think eventually we did have regrets. I mean, Shea Patterson, I think he was not. I mean, obviously, I'll put it in my own words. He wasn't the solution. Otherwise, they wouldn't have traded him to New Orleans back midway through the year. And then, I thought, to me, I know that there's some words about Lynch right now elsewhere outside the league, but at the end of the season, he looked like he was going to, as long as he wanted to be there, he had a legitimate shot at being the guy next year. Because, I mean, he ended the year on some pretty high notes for the Panthers. I think he did a great job, to me, when he came in against the Maulers, but there was going to be a legitimate QB battle no matter what, because all 3 of those QBs had their moments, and I think all were going to deserve at least a legitimate shot in camp. So, yeah, there's a bit of regrets, I would say. Patterson didn't pan out as they expected. It was I think had a limiting amount of arm talent, and was a little bit turnover prone. But nonetheless, they made adjustments. So, I think every team's got their own thoughts on some draft regrets. Of course, things changed over and whatnot. For many of those teams. I mean, obviously the Maulers, they had their own decisions and changes they had to do. I mean, by the end of the year, we were talking about Roland Rivers and, as well as Vad Lee. We weren't even anywhere near Kyle Aletta, and he's over in the Generals right now. So, yeah, the Panthers, I think, were one of the teams that definitely they wish they could have hit the reset button a little bit. Mm-hmm. But again, I stress, like I said in just the previous answer prior, I like Josh Love and Eric Berrier. I think that they're a good duo right now. And a lot of fans, I think, they saw what Eric Berrier did against the Generals, and I think they want to see more of that. A a little bit more mobility. He seemed like he had good pocket awareness, was able to get down connections with receivers. And keep in mind, the Panthers are bringing back some good receiving talent. Yeah, they don't have Lance Lenore, but Joe Walker at the end of the year was getting on a hot streak. Ishmael Hyman had some excellent moments of his own. So, they're bringing back some guys that, you shouldn't have to slouch at, that are going to be competitors and contributors. And not to mention, when you got pass catching and good running backs in Reggie Corbin and Stevie Scott, that opens up more possibilities in the passing game. And, Reggie Corbin just being Reggie Corbin, they're going to have one of the better run games in the league. The Panthers, they're in a good place. Even with the draft, with Shea Patterson not panning out, they still set themselves up with a solid spot to be in come this year.
I would agree with that. So because I think, don't you guys still need a third quarterback, or
well, yeah, we only have two, so I am fully expecting, at least I believe, that the Panthers are going to pick up a third QB. I do know that there have been some rumblings that there were going to be at least one or two ex-CFL QBs coming down, and I imagine the Panthers have to be in the running for one of them at some point. So, because I think every team's going to go into the camp with at least three. The only two that have two quarterbacks right now are the Generals and the Panthers. And the Generals, they have two USFL QBs from last year. Aletta they traded for, or they picked up off waivers, and then DeAndre Johnson, who, by the way, I think people are undervaluing how good he was when he started off last year. He's back, and he is a good dual threat QB that was showing off. He's got the arm talent to boot before Luis Perez stepped in and kind of they kept that formula rolling because it was working. So, the Panthers, they have another spot. I don't think that's bad to have a third QB. Honestly, every team in the league, I think, should have three for that competition. So why not? And there's rumblings anyway that the league wants to possibly have that reserve backup third quarterback as like the 51st roster spot. So, I think getting three is going to happen before camp. It is sneaking up. I mean, it is, as we're talking, it's early March, and camp's only about 2 weeks away. So they're going to have to do that soon, but I think it is going to happen. They'll get a third guy in, I think.
So I ask mostly because of the situation that you do need a third quarterback. Mr. Quentin Dormady has come onto the market. Do you think because of the reason he came onto the market that he is now untouchable? As in that nobody wants to touch him, nobody wants to take the chance to bring him on. I mean, if you look at his play was okay, I guess, at best. I mean, it doesn't help you play for the worst team in your league.
Well, yeah.
I don't. God only knows why he did what he did, but for the play factor, do you think that would be worth a pickup, or do you think people are just going to be like?
I think for me, I'm going to put this caveat out here that some stuff is still in the weeds with this whole situation. I mean, there's been back and forth on that issue of the leaking of plays, his release or whatnot. Like I can't fully comment on that because there's so much that's still kind of gray area that's come out in the last, say, 24 hours. If I'm the USFL and I look at Quentin Dormady and say some of the allegations of sharing plays or like letting out secrets go is a thing, yeah, maybe if I'm a GM, I probably steer clear of that. I mean, that's not really a team first mentality type of deal. That being said, again, got to stress that there's still a lot to figure out with that story. But if it is to be the case, a true thing that happens, if it does happen, I would probably not want to unless you get every angle of that story figured out first. A good general manager will get every angle review on something like that, and they will decide based off those points of reference. But I think in this case, maybe you don't. But again, so much is in the gray area with it. It's hard to say. The Panthers could. I mean, if he's available, yeah, I mean, they could. There's still a piece. I just don't know if they'll do it. That's the only thing. It's totally up to Steve Kaiser at that point.
So you said that there were like 2 CFL QBs that were being looked at. Who's left that's good? I mean, MBT decided to come down. He's going to New Orleans. My favorite CFL quarterback finally came back down to the U.S. Nathan Rourke signed with the Jaguars. So who's left?
Yeah, not too much. I'm trying to find the quarterback. Basically, it was a former Bombers QB. And I'm going. I apologize. I am. My memory is kind of waning on this because he hasn't been officially signed. That being said, if he does sign, then I mean that's fine. I don't think there's too many CFL QBs that are going to be doing a jump right away. Like in this instance, and I will find the name before I'm done talking, so bear with me for those listening. And you might be pulling your hair out right now as I am trying to find this. I don't think many. The only QBs that would jump are probably ones that they're looking to kind of get out of being maybe say like a backup or go back to the U.S. in this regard. So that's the main thing. Is that's what you're looking at. Honestly, I'm spacing. I am not finding. It's like Cortep, I think it is. I'm going to kick myself for this. I just have to refine the cue. I have to refine it. That's what's going to drive me nuts. Bombers, USFL. But no, if you're looking at like CFL QBs that would make the jump, it's going to be guys that are looking for like maybe to see if they can get out of a backup role. Something along that line is what will be the deal.
So, because I know our good buddy Shea Patterson is up there.
Yep.
If I was him, he's basically gone through everything that he can. I would stay up there, try to get some success. I will say it's hard to get some success when, no offense, you go from one bad bottom of the league team to another. I personally feel like Saskatchewan is not very good. But
well, I mean, Patterson, remember, he's already had connections with the CFL previous. So, him going back, it's good to have. He's good to have an avenue there. With the Saskatchewan Roughriders, though, he's not. I mean, I don't suspect him to be starting. I think he at least has an avenue to where he can go play. I mean, remember, you're going to see, Trevor Harris is heading over to be the Roughriders starter coming this year. And Harris, talk about a guy that in recent years he went from being, I think, middle of the road in terms of QB status to where last year with the Alouettes, he kind of got elevated to one of the top guys in the CFL again. So, the Roughriders, they took a gamble with him, and then Cody Vajaro they let go, after having a solid run. And Vajaro is going to be on his own path again once more. So I think, Patterson being there with a Harris is good, and it's definitely a path he wants to go. And again, I mean, he gets another avenue to play. That's great. I think you look at his situation you have with the Breakers. Remember, Fedora left, and DiFilippo has been kind of changing things up for the most part in that QB room. I mean, you pick up Akeel Glass, you pick up, McLeod Bethel Thompson, or McLeod, or McLeod Bethel Thompson. I keep saying McLeod, but McLeod Bethel Thompson, MBT, dude that has plenty of accolades in the CFL and in spring football. You have, and of course Davis Cheek, who's had plenty of, I think, people excited for him. It was going to be hard for him to stick with the Breakers, and I think the Panthers already moved on with their own setup. So, he gets his avenue to still play, and I think the USFL gets their QBs they want. So it's the best of both worlds there.
yes. So, all right. Let's do some schedule talk.
Yeah. Why not? I love it.
And if you're still looking for that, if you do find that,
Oh, I guarantee you I'm about to find it because now I'm just kind of digging even further in. I believe I have. Now
okay.
that you mention it, let me just check one final time. Come on, show me the money. There it is, Dakota Prukop, who is from Oregon. That Dave Naylor had mentioned he was going to jump to the USFL. However, he has not been announced to a team. So that's who I suspect the Panthers might possibly be picking up. Now, it's funny because I say suspect because remember, the Generals only have two. They actually let go of DeJuan Neal, who was a IFL prospect that had great talent, who had his own successful years out there. But a lot of it, I think, came down to roster cutting and kind of management. So I have a suspicion, as long as it's still happening, that Prukop will be possibly in with the Panthers. That's my hopeful guess. But he was supposed to be coming to the USFL. No official transaction's been released yet. I'm leaning that he might be the Panthers' third QB because they also have that roster space still available. But we'll see.
So the players that are kind of in the leagues that they're in that are not in the NFL and are kind of starting to approach that age of like, okay, I'm not going to make it to the NFL. My dream of playing in the league is basically done. So I guess basically like someone like my favorite, Cardale Jones, who is with the Massachusetts Pirates in the IFL.
Yep.
And I also hear, speaking of the Pirates, that there could be a rumor that they're going to the AFL next year.
Interesting. I've heard there's a lot of stuff around the Pirates. I have heard these days between a move to Chicago. I mean, you name it. I don't know. It's funny because you talk IFL. I do follow it. But they're an organization I think has a lot of heat around them. Funny you bring that up. But yeah, Cardale Jones going over there. That's still is fascinating to me. That's a team that I definitely can see them picking up because they like picking up the high profile guys. So yeah, kind of still weird that he's going to be there, but cool. I'm glad for him.
I was surprised when they announced USFL that nobody picked him up because I mean he was kind of balling in XFL in 2020 before all that happened.
Yeah, his early games. I know the whole Curse of the Sonic movie thing comes up every now and then after he went and saw Sonic the Hedgehog in theaters. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I've wondered about him. He did attend XFL camps this past summer. Mm-hmm. He was on that radar. It's just he wasn't picked up. And I think part of it might just be that the USFL, like I said, they seem to have found their core group of guys. And I think that it could also just be that they've also stated too they want to go younger when they can. I know MBT is 34 years old, and some people point at that like, well, wait a minute, why'd you pick him? Well, that's a bit more of a status thing. I'll be honest with you, in terms of a guy that has proven talent. So let's keep that in mind as well. Dude is a star football player in this level. But like for Cardale Jones, the market's tough. It's a tough market right now. I mean, the XFL they got a lot of guys that where either you saw proven commodities or at least more proven commodities in the spring scene coupled with bigger names. So he kind of got marketed out, it seems, in terms of competition. And then the USFL, they've been going mostly younger and have gotten their own bigger names, as we've seen. So, 3 years gap as well. I mean, keep in mind, it's been a 3-year gap since he's played in the XFL. Would have been a harder case. I think for the IFL, you got to keep in mind they have a connection where XFL teams are supposed to be looking at these rosters. He could leverage that. There's still time. It would need some things to go his way, in particular for rosters, but that's your next best case there. The USFL maybe could have used them. I just it's all comes down to GM preferences, and I think a lot of them they want to go young guys that are diamonds in the rough from possibly either schools that are more like the D2 HBCU track, like we saw with the Kiel Glass, or guys like say like a Ryan Willis or like an MBT that they're they're either bigger name or they're spring guys that have the potential to keep building upon their brand like that. So, yeah, I understand, but it would have been hard. I think it's getting harder for him, I think, to break in. And it's QB market's a tough market. It's one of the most competitive positions in football.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of, I guess, tie this all back in, who do you think is more likely to win it all first? Your Michigan Panthers or the Massachusetts Pirates? Do you think the Pirates are built to win now? I know that they won it all in the IFL in 21, and they had like an early exit, I believe, last year. It was either first or second round.
Yeah, they were upset early on last season by, I believe, actually, who got to the championship in their section, which was the Quad City Steamwheelers. So, Steamwheelers, they obviously they did their own thing. For the Pirates, I'm pulling up my IFL knowledge really quick here on the fly. It really all depends. I mean, I know they saw their QB room is going to be decided here soon. Obviously, they have Cardell Jones. They picked up Mike Glass, who is a CFL prospect and had played at Eastern Michigan recently. So you got that all sorted out. I know that they're going to have, for example, they'll have some key pieces returning. Like I think Isaac Zico is still returning, if I remember right. I got to check here as well because I'm spacing. There are other Owens, who's returning as well. That dude balled last season. So, and keep in mind, they also have Alejandro Banfield. So QB position is going to be quite a battle there, and it's a good setup. Do they win the IFL before the Panthers win the USFL? I don't know, because I think, to me, I think that they have an uphill climb that's pretty hard in their own right. They picked up some high profile talent. They got good receiving core. Their bread and butter has also been a lot more, I think, leaning defensively. They make sure teams kind of, get into a low scoring, pacing affair. But I think the Pirates have a lot more competition in terms of guys that are in the IFL that are going to be juggernauts. I mean, I know you can say what you want about the Rattlers blowing leads and losing, but like they're eventually going to break through one of these days soon, and they're always going to be a big hurdle for teams. I think in their section, like I said, Quad City, they retooled again, so that's going to be pretty hard for them to kind of jump over them, in my opinion. So I'm looking out for them, and I think the IFL is a lot more balanced than it has been in recent years, as you can see. So I think that. I'm going to go with Michigan, but it's kind of hard for me to pick because, again, it's two different sports in terms of football. And I think also the fact that, the IFL and indoor arena football signings midseason are so crucial. Like they change the scope of a team off of one player, just depending. So that argument could go either way. I'll go a smidge Michigan, maybe because I'm a homer here, but I like where the Panthers are at, and I think that they could be a dark horse to make a good run. If they can get in the playoffs, that's the thing. If they can get in the playoffs and Josh Love or Eric Berrier, or if it happens to be Dakota Prutop that comes in and they start slinging it, and Joe Walker continues his upward progression, Stevie Scott and Reggie Corbin are continuing at the same level that they were last year. There's possibilities they can make some waves in the North. They just have to, prove it against the two best teams in the North that I still have above them, which is the Generals and the Stars. So, slightly Panthers. But again, it really comes down to just, the IFL's preference on how certain signings come in and go as needed. A lot more fluidity and roster shakeup in that league than I would say in like a USFL.
So, speaking of the schedule, let's finally go ahead and get into this.
Yeah.
So, you guys kick off that opening weekend on Sunday night at the Houston Gamblers, good old ref's favorite team.
Oh yeah.
He's been thrown out there as a closeted Michigan Panthers fan. So,
Don't tell him that right now. We got a grudge game to solve. He'll gladly. I know he'll deny that.
So I mean, I guess if you look at the first stretch, you got at Houston, which is going to be in Liberty Stadium. You got at Philly, which is going to be at Ford Field. New Jersey at home, which is going to be at Ford Field. Memphis at Ford Field at home. Mm-hmm. And Pittsburgh at Ford Field at home. The first stretch here of the first 5, what's your kind of outlook for the first half of the season?
So first half of the year, and I think it's defined as you get to week 3 that they're going to have a stretch of 4 home games mid-year. Pretty nice, but also kind of you got to get through the ends of the schedule with the road games. I should say one mention that week 2 is actually at Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium. It's not at Ford Field, and that's due to a Luke Combs concert. We've learned. You got to pick between one or the other. They're going to go with the Combs concert most likely, as much as I, as a football fan would wish it's the other way, but whatever, it's okay. But sure, so they have one less game they get to play. They get to play over there at of course home, because that would have been 6 home games technically. I know it's listed as Philadelphia would have hosted, but that home crowd would have been Michigan based first. So That's the only thing that's a downer. But for the Panthers, I think you look at this opening schedule, and to me, based on just where they are as a team, I like it. I think that I know that some people will say differently. I think they can start off the win on a hot note and get revenge on the Gamblers right out of the gate. To me, the season I think will be defined right off the bat as how good this Panthers team is in terms of just week 2, because you're going to have a neutral site game at Tom Benson, Hall of Fame Stadium against one of the top 2, well, in my eyes, the top team in the North in Philadelphia that is returning its high-powered offense and upgrading its offense in some ways as well. Remember, Corey Coleman, he just got picked up by the Stars. That's going to be a massive gain for a receiving core that already has pretty damn good levels of talent and only lost Maurice Alexander last year. So that's a litmus test. I always look at some games for litmus tests in terms of where I'm going to place them and how the season will go. If they come in and they play Philadelphia hard, and then next week they also, like if they steal one of 2 games in the weeks 2 and 3 between the Stars and the Generals, that's huge. I think that you're going to have to either win or at least split the series between Philadelphia and New Jersey, and then play crisp football the rest of the way to get your playoff spot in the North. Because if you get swept by one of them, your odds are going to be harder off to, I think, get possibly that second spot for a northern seed to get in the semifinals. You have to at least split your games with those 2 teams, in my eyes. Pittsburgh, complete wild card, and that's the week 5 matchup. Because really, I could see them being world beaters, but it comes down to, how good is like that QB room, and I do have high hopes on them. Like, does James Morgan or Troy Williams come out and just completely dominate? If they do, hey, the North will be kind of nuts. Like, it could be one of those things where like all 4 teams could just cannibalize each other based on these rosters. I love what the Maulers have defensively. So, that's going to be its own test outright. The only game I'm like that I've kind of put in the same level as like the Gamblers, where I think that could be a win. Although I put an asterisk because I think I have less faith in this one than the Gamblers matchup first 5 weeks, is the Showboats. Because it's a home game. The Showboats, I think, have some questions defensively, but on the opposite side of the ball, they are going to put up a test, I think, for the Panthers, because whether it is like, say, whether it is, of course, Ryan Willis behind center or Brady White or Cole Kelly, I think one of those 3 will lead a pretty solid offense this year. But I think the Panthers will walk away with that win. So right now, I see in the first 5 games, I can see them going. At best, I can see him going 4-1. At worst, I see him going 2-3.
Oh,
I think.
Wow.
maybe 1-4, but that is contingent on how good the showboats are. But I could see them going a comfortable 2-3 through 5 weeks.
So, because there's only 10 games in the regular season, if you're sitting at 2-3 after 5, is that okay in your eyes? Is that kind of comfortable? What is a 2-3 in your eyes?
The 2-3 in my eyes is that they lose all their northern matchups, and that's not good. If you're a Panthers fan, I mean, if you're 2-3 and maybe you, like, honestly, it'd be weird because I could say that it'd be better to be 2-3 and to steal 2 of those 3 northern games than to win the South matchups and then completely whiff on your North opponents. Because again, you want to make sure you're at the top half of your conference. So I think if you're 2-3, the context is important. You know, if you whiff and, like I said, you lose all 3 of those North matchups to start off the year, you're in a rough spot. You're the pressure for you second half of the season is amplified at that point. But if you can say you take a win from the Maulers again and say you steal one of those 2 against the Stars or Generals and say you lose 3, you know, you'll be feeling a bit better. I think still, like, losing to the Gamblers, I think would stink because I really do believe I'm hamming it up a bit for the grudge game here too, but I do believe that they are better than Houston, and I think that they should win week 1. If they don't win week 1, that's going to be a big downer to me because that's a very winnable game to start out. And I think that if you can do that, you can finish 3-2 through 5 games. And then you'll be really comfortable at that case because you can then say you win 2 of those North games and then you have that third Houston win under your belt for overall record. That will make you feel really good in terms of that race for the Northern Conference. So I think 3-2 is realistic. 2-3 is the bottom out, but it's the comfortable bottom out if you get 2 of those Northern wins. And I think 4-1 is the comfortable, like, very confident side of me. I don't think they finish 5-0 through 5 weeks because one of those Northern teams is going to get a win. It's just going to be a very competitive conference this year.
So do you feel like, so I'm assuming you're basically saying when you say like 2-3, you're basically saying, okay, guaranteed win over the Gamblers.
I would say as close as you can get. No wins guaranteed, but if I had a confidence meter for every one of these 5 games, my confidence in them beating Houston is at its height out of the 5. So not 100%, but it's definitely higher than all the others in the first 5.
So, I mean, you guys have been building this grudge game up quite a bit.
Yes, we have.
Which is good. What are you going to think or feel if this comes back to bite you in the face and we beat Houston, we built ourselves to beat Houston, we beat Houston, and then we just fell apart and we lost every other game?
Well, I mean, if they win that game and then fall apart, then I don't know. I get that cap under my belt for the show. Like, that's most how I feel. Otherwise, like, I guess that makes me label, say Houston loses to us week 1 and they go on a tear. I'm gonna have some questions, but that's just how football is. Football is a goofy sport. Sometimes the every given Saturday or Sunday mantra does exist and it's a real thing. That being said, if I get 1 win against the Gamblers and then we bottom out and go 1-9, I'll feel worse than last year because we didn't get 2 wins and we were still at the bottom of the barrel. But, B, on the flip of that, I at least get to say that I got the grudge game under my belt as a fan. So there's that. But I think if you're a Panthers fan, you go 1-9 this year, it's gonna feel kind of numbing because you're already used to, sans last year, some sub-quality football in Detroit anyway. I think fans are kind of hoping for, either between the Lions or the Panthers, they're hoping for a winner. And I hope for the case that they are. I think they could be. Like I said, I think they're a dark horse in the North to make a run. There's good components here for the Panthers to make a run or at least get one of those 2 playoff spots. So, yeah, I mean, I'll feel upset if they finish 1-9. I don't see them being 1-9. I think they bottom out at worst. At worst, I think they at least get 2-8 again. you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's where they land. I think they're more like a 500 team right now. If you look at the back half of the schedule, like the South opponents that they have to face still, like for example, the Breakers and the Stallions, those are pretty dominant teams. So I think those are possible losses. And then again, I think you see the North that a lot of split decisions happen with those matchups. I think they finish closer to 5-5, 4-6, or 6-4. They're a middle of the road record team with a dark horse capability of getting the championship because they're in a tough conference where I think any given conference game can go either way this year for the Northern Conference.
So if Michigan splits the matchups in the North, because you're almost going to have to pull off at least one miracle. So you're going to have to,
I mean,
at least, because Memphis, because they're an expansion team, yeah, they look okay. Maybe they'll look really good by the time Michigan faces them, but right now, to your point, I would put that as close to a guaranteed win as possible. Nothing is guaranteed. So, I mean, that right there to me makes them at least 6-4. Is 5-5 or 6-4 if you split the North games? Is that good enough to get you in?
Yeah. I mean, you look at last year, 6-4 got the Stars in. I think a lot of it's going to come down to the semantics of who has tiebreakers where for the North. I don't see this year being a year where you see 2 9-1 rosters make the playoffs again. Last year, sure, maybe you just happen to have it lucky where the Generals and Stallions loaded up that hard and they went 9-1. I think that the level of competition, the floor has rose for the rest of the league with some of these free agent pickups. Mm-hmm. So I think 6-4 still gets you a playoff spot. So if the Panthers can finish 6-4, I think they're in. Their main competition is really it's just going to come down to who gets beaten up less in the North. It's that simple to me, because I really do see that that conference. It's one way or another. It's a similar deal because it's so many teams, but that conference I see is very much it's going to beat each other up, and you're going to have it come down to the wire this year at the end of the season compared to last. The South I see is a lot more decisive. I really do think it's going to be, unless the Showboats come out to play and their QB room elevates them higher than expected, I suspect the Stallions and the Breakers are going to be there again because they brought a lot of their key guys back. Again, roster turnover is important with these leagues. Those two teams brought a majority of their roster back and switched out, and the only thing they did most part was the Breakers switched out their QB room, but they have a big, talented QB room now. So, it comes down to those aspects. But I think the North, if you can finish 6-4, you get in the playoffs in the North. If you're in the South, good luck. I think you have to. I think you're going to be bracing for a harder stretch if you're not named the Breakers or the Stallions. But I think the North, at least, they're going to beat each other up. I think 6-4 is very much the threshold you should be aiming for.
So, what are your thoughts on ref's recent statement of gamblers are going to go 12-0, gamblers are going to go 36-0 and win the next 3 USFL championships?
Oh, that's funny.
I feel like it's clickbait, really. Like he doesn't.
Oh no,
really
he's totally messing. I mean, look, I love the confidence, but no, he's totally messing. No team goes 12-0 for 3 straight years. First off, but I mean, hey, good luck to you. Like I said, I don't have as much confidence as I've said at the beginning. I don't have as much confidence in the Gamblers. They are very much the team that needs to prove me wrong, and I will. And sure, I've said with any team I've ever covered, I will gladly eat crow if you prove me wrong. But I don't see it, is what I'm going to say. And that's a general statement on the Gamblers. I just think that they have a lot more to prove than the rest of the league does at this time. But I could be wrong. Again, they've had the most roster turnover in terms of key players. They've had the most coaching turnover, which is, to me, even more important if you're looking at that. So hey, good luck. But it's a lot of it's hamming up for the grudge game, though. That's the main thing. Keep that in mind. It's a lot of us hamming it up. But again, Houston is my number 8th overall ranked team. They are the bottom for me. They just have a lot of questions need answered. That's the thing. I don't think they finished 12-0 this year. Personally, I think a good year for them this year. It sounds bad, but I have them. If they can get to 4-6, I think that they have done a solid job this year, like 500 range. That's to me overachieving for them. But hey, if I'm proven wrong, great. I'll hold this audio. You can hold me hostage with this audio clip, and I will gladly say, yeah, I was wrong. But that's where I am preseason. Things do change in spring football quite fast.
So, because we're about a little more than a month out, who would be your preseason playoffs predictions and winners? And what, besides the Gamblers being at 8, what does your preseason standings for the league look like?
Okay. So we did a community power rankings recently that was posted up by USFL Network, had the network guys, had guys from USFL Newsroom posting polls in, SSN, Sideline Sports Network, the guy who hosts News USFL on Twitter, and then we had Ducky, of course, post in. So,
community legend Ducky.
Yeah, of course. A good mixture of a melting pot of what you expect from people that cover the league on a community level. And I will say that the final ranking did not reflect what I had. There are a few things I was shocked by. So first off, my ranking is as follows. I have the Stallions and then the Stars 1 and 2. Generals were 3. And then beyond that, it goes as follows. Breakers 4, Maulers 5, Panthers 6, Showboats 7, and Gamblers 8. That was obviously the community vote was not that case. And the Maulers were up at number 4. Or actually, they were up at 3, and then Breakers 4, Generals 5, which I found fascinating, but that's where we're at. So I personally think, you see in my rankings, the North is very much the top-heavy one in my rankings. It goes from, they have the 2 and 3 position, and then, of course, the 5 and 6. Whereas you see the Stallions are at the top. Again, they brought basically a good majority of that championship team they brought back, plus a few extra pieces. And then, the Breakers are still up there at the 4. I just think at the bottom half of the South, I have more questions about the bottom half of the South at this time. That's my thing. I have more questions about the bottom half of the South Conference right now.
It makes sense because, as far as the South goes, it's basically Birmingham's world. Everyone's just living in it. Whereas up here in the North, it's all neck and neck. It's really anybody's, division to win this year. And I do agree. I would probably give Philly the edge just because, they are the defending division champions. They are bringing a lot back. But I don't know. If I did one, it'd probably be Stallions 1, Stars 2. I think it'd basically be yours. I would just flip Gamblers and Showboats just because Showboats is the expansion team. We don't really know what they look like. And this is just preseason too.
Well, remember too, I know you're saying expansion, but they're basically bringing their coaching staff from Tampa. It's Tampa Bay, but reskinned. You gotta remember that. Tampa Bay, they put that brand as dormant. It still is going to be part of the league's future. That's something that you gotta keep in mind. But it's basically Tampa Bay, but they moved them to Memphis. That's really all they did. So I also put them at that 7 spot because Todd Haley's been around. He knows what the USFL is doing. And again, they have a quarterback room that has, I think, good talent with, say, Ryan Willis. Brady White's already been there. And they brought basically all their receivers back. As long as their line can have a more consistent level of play and that they can finish drives. That was something that they failed at last year. Tampa Bay was in games. They just couldn't finish against good opponents. If they can finish against the top level of the league, that's why I'm kind of like they're lower down, but I also can see them making more realistically that jump. It's just there's still a few more questions, I think, like defensively, and can they protect whoever's behind center better? Those are things. And can their run game improve? That was something that they lacked at times last year. They weren't as efficient in the run offense. Can they get something out of that and upgrade that? But I see your point. Like I said, I think like Houston, they do have Kenji Bahar back. I understand he's been in that system, or he's been in that team so far. It's just Curtis Johnson's coming in. That offense is going to change. It's more West Coast, less air raid, from what I understand that they're doing. A little bit some spread some spread offense concepts that Curtis Johnson was talking about. How fast does that get adopted, and does that offense click right out of the gate? And out of the weapons that's there, do they hit it off the ground running? Mark Thompson's back, so I'll give them that. They do have Mark Thompson returning. He was a crucial part of that offense last year in terms of running back. I'm glad they have him. They have some guys in the receiving corps, like Anthony Ratliff-Williams, who's going to be returning. That'll be vital. Brandon Barnes, he'll be back as tight end. Hopefully they get him more involved. But, I mean, defensively, that section has gotten completely flipped over on the script. So many questions on guys that have either been gone or have moved to a different team in the case of Ahmad Gooden. And they have a new defensive coordinator as well. So that's why another reason I put him at 8. You have people that have left. You have a new coaching staff. I think I do wonder how I would change this from 8. I guess if at least they had kept maybe like at least Reggie Northrup or Donald Payne, maybe I could think about putting them up a little bit more or possibly switching them out. But again, I mean, they lost 2 of their key linebackers. Chris Odom, obviously he got moved up to the NFL for obvious reasons. So he's gone. Will Likely's not there anymore. Micah Abernathy. I mean, there's a lot of pieces they have to figure out. It's just hard for me to move them past 8. They have so much stuff they have question marks on.
There's 2 quarterbacks currently. Don't know how much longer they'll be in the XFL. There's 2 quarterbacks in the XFL that did play on USFL teams last year. I think you could almost guess who they are, because one did play for the Panthers, Mr. Lynch, and Te'amu in DC. If I remember correctly, he did play for Tampa Bay last year.
He did, yes.
Why does it look like they haven't been able to transition their game properly? Do you think it's mostly on like the system, the style of offense that the teams run? There are a few people in my circles outside of the Discord that believe one of the main things that hurts Paxton is his height. He is really tall, so he can't really be elusive. My argument against that is, well, it doesn't matter how tall or tiny you are. If you don't have the time to take off or make your progressions because the pocket is collapsing, you're going to look bad either way. To Jordan's point, he did look decent, I believe, in St. Louis in the second go-around at XFL in 2020. But for whatever reason, and I can't figure it out, for whatever reason, he's just become more heavily dependent on his legs. He almost looks like he's afraid to throw the ball.
Well, yeah, I think if you're talking about Te'amu, I actually was high on him last year. I felt that when he was with Tampa Bay, I think a few play calling options, and in particular, I felt a lot of in the moment situational football did not go his way. I think as much as I know I just praised a lot of turning receivers, something they do need to work on this year, like Derek Dillon, Rashard Davis, and Vinny Papali, John Franklin at times, they would have unopportunistic drops. I felt that the Bandits really could have been a playoff team if they had just not had mental errors just go their way. That's the main thing. They weren't too bad. And Tamu, I mean, keep in mind, he led the league in receiving yards. He threw 14 touchdowns. He had some interceptions. Some of those weren't his fault. Some were off the hands of receivers. But he did throw 12 picks. But like, he was a solid QB last year in the USFL. It's just I felt he wasn't bailed out by his teammates well enough at times. And I think this time with the defenders, I almost see somewhat the similar thing happening, but to an even grander extent. I don't like the defenders. To me, they have an excellent run game. They finally figured that out last week that they should just lean on that, because offensively, none of their options have been able to excel in getting open or getting in rhythm in the passing game. And I think Ta'amu is just not comfortable with who he's throwing to. He's also getting pressured a decent amount. So you got to, at least he feels like he's been getting under pressure. He avoided sacks week 1, but week 2, he did get hit several times. Ball security was a problem. And I think that the defenders have more questions in the receiving game than the Bandits did last year. They have good talent. The Bandits just need to know how to finish drives and not have mental gaffes that made them kind of deflate. So for Ta'amu, I think that's not helped him. There have been some moments, though, he's not been great in the passing game, and there have been times that you could argue he has gone downward since the Battlehawk days. But I don't think last year was a lot on him. I think a lot of it came down to execution for the guys around him. I think that they could have possibly been a playoff team if they just execute a little bit better. Because, I mean, even you think about the Breakers at the end of last year for what it's worth. The Breakers had an excellent defense, but they had offensive struggles because Kyle Sloter was injured throughout the year, and they could not get Zach Smith to operate at a regular rate to compensate for that injury for Sloter. So the Bandits just missed marquee moments to take advantage of the Breakers having some slumps. That's the thing. I think this version of Ta'amu and the defenders, I think you're seeing that maximized to his supporting staff just not helping him. But, and some things, maybe it's self-doubting on himself too with that case. But I think Tampa Bay Bandits version of Ta'amu, I think, was a little underrated in my eyes. That's just me.
I could see that. I mean, it's almost like, you brought up Kyle Sloter. I personally feel like he's been completely dissed by Arlington because they're just now going to make him the starter. I mean, he's better than Drew Plitt, in my opinion.
Well, I think that they have been, I think, feeling out. I think there was a discussion that Plitt was in because Sloter was dealing with an elbow injury. But I also believe Plitt was getting an opportune chance, and Sloter has the NFL experience. Again, as much as I just said previously that, Sloter's injuries did handicap the Breakers offense at times last year. When he was healthy early weeks, he was on. So I do wonder what the Renegades look like with him being fully healthy. And I think it's a necessary change for them because their offense has been kind of abysmal through 2 weeks, especially last week, only 125 yards. For any spring league is abysmal. Any football level is abysmal. So, yeah, they definitely could use it. Without a doubt. I mean, we saw him in the USFL last year. Sloter, when he's healthy, when he's gotten time, dude can sling it. Yeah, he's had some turn. He is a bit turnover prone. He does take a few chances, but a healthy quarterback like him, when he doesn't have to worry about his hamstring getting all jacked up and all that, dude can fling the rock and can win you some games.
For sure. So I guess for now, the last thing, because I could ask you questions for hours.
Oh no, I mean, hey, I can answer you. It's funny, it's a Panthers talk, but like I follow all these leagues, so I can at least give you my take on something knowledgeably if you need, as you could tell. So don't worry about it. All good.
So if you had to take, I guess, like a preseason jab at it, who would be your USFL playoffs and champion for this year?
Okay, thinking this out loud. So if I'm doing the South, that's the one I have the most confidence in, and that's going to be you're going to see the Breakers and Stallions rematch
Mhm.
in Canton again, as long as they're going to Canton, which we'll find out. There's still details about that they're trying to figure out. I think it is, so I'm not going to say, but wherever they play the semifinals,
Mhm.
Stallions Breakers is going to be the matchup. I think in the North, I know that the easy picks to me would be the Stars Generals, but I really do believe that division, that conference is so up for grabs. So I think the Stars will come out on top as one of those teams.
Mhm.
I'm a little more gray on the rest, but I'm going to be a homer, and I'm going to go with a 6-4 Panthers squad making it to that playoff spot in the North. It's going to be a hard fought battle. I think that the Maulers, I think, make a good case for that team that makes the biggest leap this year as well. And I think
Mhm.
the Generals fans out there will say, well, we still have a pretty damn good group, so that's hard to say. But I'm going to put a homer pick out because I think anyone beyond Philadelphia, I have a hard time nailing down who's
Mhm.
going to take it. So I'm going to go with the Panthers, that they have the things break their way. They go 6-4. They get just enough north wins to jump up, and then like the Stars finish, I think 8-2. If I were to take a guess, sure. And
Mhm.
if I guess record wise, I'll say that the Stallions finish 8-2, Breakers finish 6-4, 7-3, something like that. And so, that in mind, I think the Stallions do beat the Breakers still. Just again, it's returning most of the roster. I think
Mhm.
that squad is that good to where they'll do it again, even with the new hubs and on the road this year.
Mhm.
And I think in the North, as much as I just said about the Panthers getting it, the Stars, I think it'll be a rematch of last year. Not going to lie. And
Mhm.
that there's, like I said, there's some new players in this game that maybe will change things up. But I think bringing Case Cookus back on a full offseason, knowing he's going to be the guy coming into camp, uh, having a good chunk of your roster come back for the Stars that was kicking into full gear on the defensive side, like Channing Stribling returning, that's a massive return. From what I understand, Adam Rodriguez should still be back from what I've seen on the roster. So like that dude. Besides Chris Odom, he was overshadowed by him, and he was second in sacks last year for Philadelphia. That pass rush was getting home, coming into the end stretch. It's one of the reasons why they beat the Generals in the semifinals. So you bring those guys back. You bring a receiving core that has the likes still of like a Devin Gray, of a Jordan Sewell, Deontay Overton's coming back. You have Chris Rowland, and then they brought in Corey Coleman. I mean, Bug Howard. Look, all these weapons. They have a fast set of people that can catch the ball really well. And most of those guys were on that roster last year and know what Bart Anderson company wants. And they also invested a little more into the offensive line. I like where Philadelphia is at. For champion, it's hard for me to say. I actually think Philadelphia gets revenge. And I think that as long as Case Cookus stays healthy, I think it's going to come down the wire again, but I think Philadelphia breaks back and you'll see the Stars return to the top of the podium in USFL history. That's my preseason one, though, but I think Philadelphia is poised to, with a full year of guys, they know what they have. Like
Mhm.
between the two teams, like Jamar, that's why I value the Stallions and the Stars the most because they know what they have right now. They brought back what works right out of the gate. I think
Mhm.
Philadelphia gets the deal done this year because I think Case Cookus stays in and fully is healthy this year to finish the job wherever it's at, if it's in Canton again, which I think it is. So I think they get it done.
Um. So, what do you think of the? Because eventually the playoffs will not all be in Canton. Because with the possible expansions coming up, there's going to be more teams eventually, and this, that, and the other. I mean, you guys have drug it through the mud. That
Mm-hmm.
it's a good thing, but USFL is set up to be able to last for like 10 years. So I mean, at some point there's going to be more teams, there's going to be more divisions. um, what do you think of having the championship always at the same site?
Uh, I think for now it's not bad. Like you saw what Canton did last year. I think I think the league is confident that if they did it again there, they have no qualms about it because it brought people out. I mean, the Hall of Fame, in terms of the NFL, in terms of football, I almost said the NFL, but it really is football now. It's kind of like that Mecca destination. Like it's that one place you have to go visit once if you're a football fan. So I think it's a great place to advertise like, hey, we have football history. We have a game being played here with top quality or high quality football being played at that facility. And keep in mind, and you've seen this too, Mike. I mean, the Canton, Ohio, they are building that destination to be a vacation spot. So I don't think there's any problem with them saying in these early years, at least, to go, we have a place that has a great relationship with us. They've stressed for all the way since they build Canton as their playoff destination that those two entities, they're tied hand in hand with their growth. Canton wants to, build up the Hall of Fame even bigger than it ever has been. And the USFL wants a good partner that sees their vision along the way. So I think like right now it's great. I think in future years, say you want to keep growing, I don't think as long as it makes sense financially and they want to do it in the years down the road. Yeah. I mean, you can eventually start switching around cities and all that. I mean, I imagine that if you had a championship in Memphis or in, Michigan or go to Birmingham, like I bet Stallions fans would be thrilled to be having a championship hosted at that site, but you got to grow. It's crawl, walk, run, as Daryl Johnston has said. And I think Canton is the perfect example of a place that they are using that fully emphasizes that we're putting on the game, but we're also doing it our way and building it up. And it's a good spot. They filled it up last year with a good sized crowd. They'll do it again. And I think that's good for the optics for the league. And I don't see why they wouldn't want to move away from that just yet.
Yeah. I mean, so we heard over that first week of the XFL that the Dome is going to host the XFL championship if they make it that far.
The Alamo Dome, you mean? You're talking, right?
Which championship location makes more sense to you? For me personally, I think it's Canton because of everything you said and the fact that, there is the relationship, like you pointed out. It is a good spot. There are things to do right where it's at. I mean, you have the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which leads me to believe that at some point we're going to see USFL representation in the Hall of Fame. Because it is the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's not, to your guys' point on the podcast, the NFL Hall of Fame. Now, I mean, yes, you do have USFL representation from, the guys that played in the 80s, like Jim Kelly's in there. You have that, but I'm saying like you strictly spent your career in the USFL.
I see what you're saying. And I think that they're wanting to build that up. I mean, that was part of the Canton partnership last year, is that they now have in part of the building, we saw it ourselves and it's interactive. They do have a USFL section now. So you have part of that memorabilia is from the 80s iteration, which I think does deserve a lot of praise. It had a lot of innovation and I think stuff that forced football to evolve a little bit as much as it did crash and burn in the way that it did. It does hold a good place in the sports history. So they do honor that. And the stars from it, there's Jim Kelly's jersey, last I saw, was hanging up in that cabinet. And on the opposite side, you have the new USFL, as we were referring to it. So, they had at times Brian Scott's jersey in that cabinet. They had Jamar Smith's hanging up at one point. I think it is still there, if I'm right. I haven't been there since the championship in July, but Jamar Smith's got put up in there after they won the championship. The trophy got displayed, or I think is still being displayed at Canton as the centerpiece. So they want to, that's a good relationship to have. They want to be part of the football story. And this is part of it. And also, the settlement that the OG USFL, as we refer to it, me and the ref call it, and the new USFL have, where they settled and they are able to this year more fluidly use traditional USFL stats and references. That's going to be big because, like I said, that's a brand that is nostalgic and synonymous with a lot of people in different generations now. And so they're going to be able to build on those legacies of those players too. So I like it, and yeah, I mean, USFL is part of the football story now, one way or another. This new version, the old version, and their league relationship with the Canton, Ohio, yeah, they're going to keep building that section. It's obviously not as big as the NFL's because the NFL is the bona fide league in town in the world that kind of is the display of that sport. But the USFL does have a place down there and has a section to highlight its accomplishments and what it's trying to build.
Oh, it's definitely awesome. I think I went in like August after the championship.
Nice.
And when I went, because I would have come for summer stock, but it was after the fact that I discovered you guys. I discovered you guys like a month ago or something.
Hey, it happens, I appreciate it. And hey, we'll definitely that's the plan, is to go again. We're definitely gearing on up to once again do it. Most likely, if they are same schedules last year, early July, go out to Canton, Ohio. So keeping those details, but yeah, I get it.
But when I was there, they did still have the championship on display, the trophy. There was like some screen kind of talking about the specialness of what the USFL does. Like it was like clips with like Clat and different things. I do believe it was Jamar's jersey on display. But yeah, I mean, the only way, in my opinion, that I see the Alamo Dome for the XFL being the right place for this year is, one, somebody's coming in there on a hot streak like Birmingham did last year. So you either get St. Louis, who I think is going to win the North, coming in there, 10-0, 9-1. There's something that tells me I don't really see anyone going undefeated. Or San Antonio just blows by everybody, or at least wins the rest of their games, and San Antonio makes the championship. Because I think San Antonio or Houston making the championship is going to be the key to getting the Alamo Dome sold out, or at least packed well enough that it's like that, so that it doesn't look like that looks bad on TV.
Yeah, I think if you're the league, no one's going to say this publicly, but they would like to see San Antonio, if they could, get to the championship. I think that's ideal. I mean, I think it's kind of like how the USFL, no one's going to say publicly, but like, the Stallions, they hosted their hub. I mean, I think for TV and for some people wanting to travel, that's big, for them to go up there. Now, to stress the league's importance on this issue, I mean, you got to keep in mind both of these leagues are doing different strategies. I think for the XFL, they could have picked St. Louis. I think part comes down to availability, but also that they wanted, I think, a market that they knew was going to possibly be great for even a neutral site game. So, remember, they're based in Texas. So you have 3 teams in Texas. I don't think Choctaw Stadium is a good choice for a championship game. It's good for the Renegades because they already were there prior. But, I don't think that's a good choice. So that leaves TDECU and the Alamo Dome. And I think if you're basing it on interest between the two, that's where the Alamo Dome comes in. So you're in Texas, you're in your state, you get to play that game, and you can possibly sell even more tickets than you have for any of these other games. So that's great. And then the USFL, again, they're doing hubs. So, they have that relationship with Canton, so that makes sense. But, like, XFL-wise, yeah, I think it was a solid choice. The only one I think that would have been better, if you could have done it, would have been the Dome of America Center in St. Louis because of just that audience for football and the XFL. But because they're based in Texas, it makes sense to me, and it's the best of both worlds. You get the most, I think, football hungry of the 3 communities in Texas, coupled with, you being more centrally based and making it easier for your players to train and just kind of have a quick jump bus ride over from the Arlington area.
I mean, I guess to your point, with it being based in Texas and, the fact of 3 of the 4 South Division teams are in Texas, does help with that decision. I mean, if Arlington even gets lucky and just takes off and somehow makes it. I mean, realistically, the way that Orlando is trending, it's going to be a worse than Michigan Panthers type of season. It's going to be like an 0-10.
Well, you're probably more equating them to a Maulers type of year at this point, just because of I don't know. They seem very discombobulated. Offensive identity is not really there. Defense, I think, it's been treading water, but that's not meaning that it's been exceeding or thriving. So, yeah, that's where we're at right now with the Guardians. So, but no, again, San Antonio, it's the best of both worlds for that. That if you want to get an audience, I think will come out to just a game, doesn't have to be a Brahmas game, coupled with the Texas location, that's where you go. To me, that's where you go.
It makes sense. I mean, 'cause like I said, someone in Texas is winning the XFL South for sure.
Yes. Well, at this point, yes. And I think even before the Guardians were going to go on a downfall, no matter what, it was good. The odds were always stacked in the favor of a Texas team winning the South because, well, no offense, the South is basically the Texas conference. It's Orlando had to be thrown somewhere. It was going to be put there because it makes the most sense for the South logically. I mean, sure, you could have reorganized them and put Vegas in the South because putting them in the North sounds weird, but I think out of the Southness, if you want to put it, Orlando's more South, so that's why they did it. It is what it is, you did it's the best of what you could do with where you put the locations.
So, I mean, going back to USFL, eventually we're going to get expansion. Do we see expansion look more like bringing in the teams that they expanded with in the 80s, maybe at different locations, but the same nicknames? Or do we see, because I loved the AAF a lot when it first came out. I was
big fan of the teams too, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was way behind Orlando and Arizona. I liked San Antonio, which you can never bring back the San Antonio Commanders because the Brahmas are there. And I kind of was liking the Fleet a little bit, San Diego Fleet. Do we see – because the argument that's kind of – well, not argument. The discussion that's kind of come up in the Discord is you're not going to see XFL or USFL bring back the AAF teams because they're associated with a league that went under, and it's like a negative look at that league. The more I think about it, as much as I want to see the Orlando Apollos and Arizona Hotshots in the USFL or XFL, I think that point of view is the correct, proper point of view. I think that, most likely they're going to expand with the teams they used to have, Denver Gold, Chicago Blitz. I think that kind of is more likely to happen than, old teams that are associated with a bad league.
Right. So it's kind of different for each one of these leagues. The USFL obviously has nostalgia and trademarks from the 80s that they can look into. I mean, I know for certain that it was shown online that the league already has put in new trademarks for the Denver Gold, the Washington Federals, and I think the Oklahoma Outlaws, or at least the Outlaws brand from back in the day, which also played in Arizona, keep in mind. So they have brands. I mean, and there's a few others that you can get onto as well. I mean, for example, I'm a Panthers fan, but I also am first a Chicago sports fan everywhere else. I would be thrilled to see the Blitz return because of just it's the Blitz. It's Chicago sports based, and there's places you can play in Chicago, and it's another media market. I think a lot of fans want to see a West Coast team at some point for the USFL because, I mean, the one thing that Fox did strategically is they built all their teams in the Midwest and the East Coast first. More densely populated in those areas and more TV numbers in those areas. Remember, TV first-based business. So they're going to have to figure that out right now. But they have options. Remember, they have a slew of teams in the USFL's plethora that they can get trademarks and they can move forward with. The XFL, it's kind of, I know I'm also on the same page. I think both leagues want to look to expand to 10 teams in the near future, if they can stick around and do it feasibly. I just think that like the XFL, you're going to have to debate like, okay, do we want old trademarks coming back? Do we want to invest in, like, say you're talking the AAF angle, which is a risk because the AAF being itself, and then do you make a new brand, which is not out of the question. I mean, remember the Brahmas, they are brand new, they had no connection to 2020 whatsoever, and so you can do that. I mean, you have the LA Wildcats that still exist. Do you bring them back as, say, the San Diego Wildcats, something like that? Those are more questions that you're going to have to do originality with, and structuring new identities, new team branding, and kind of you can do your own flow. I think the USFL is going to lean into the nostalgia factor, and they have brands that still haven't even been brought up in the USFL that are big brands that I think people still recognize, like the Invaders. They were a very popular team they were a really solid popular team back in the day. They were playing in Oakland. You could move them elsewhere if you wanted to go to the West Coast. You can go to San Diego. You can go to San Jose. You can do, basically the Bay Area, but not Oakland if you wanted. So there's options there. They obviously have the LA Express. I don't think they'll do the LA Express, but there are places to play that aren't, say, the LA Coliseum if you wanted to take a stab at it. And Fox is based in Los Angeles as well as New York. So there are options there. A lot of questions, but like, I think if you're looking at like clarity for like expansion avenues, you have the brands the USFL has is a little more clear. So they have at least options that you can see feasibly in the distance. The XFL would have more questions of branding over cities, but again, there's cities they could pick. I think XFL, I think any spring league fan right now is almost like screaming to the mountaintops for San Diego to pick up a team in one of these leagues, because San Diego State University, when they built that new stadium where of course Qualcomm used to exist, it's a brand new state-of-the-art facility, and it's sitting there for the taking to have a pro team play in. Someone's going to pull the trigger and eventually do it. It's just that you have to do it cost effectively, and it has to make sense for one of these leagues to do it that way. For the USFL, their challenge is if they go west, they would at least have to put 2 teams on the West Coast in my eyes, because you couldn't let one just be buoyed out there by itself. You'd have to have some balance travel-wise to do that. The XFL at least has one team currently on the West Coast in Seattle, and they have Vegas sitting just outside of California. So they could probably more easily justify it doing just like one, like a San Diego, over, say, the USFL. But this is all just speculation at this point. Like, I think within the 5 years, as long as both of these leagues are around, one of them is going to expand to 10 teams. It's bound to happen. It just comes down to what those circumstances are. Part of that too, both leagues are looking for investment of upwards of like $250 million to get injected, because they want owners. They want people that can help carry the cost and can help expand into local markets more. So we got to wait and see on how that all plays out, but that's crucial to the league's overarching future and expansion opportunities that they want to do and see fit.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, to me, to your point, yes, nobody's really going to want to touch the AAF brands, even though they're good brands. But I think, if you do, be smart about it. Don't, like, okay, the Salt Lake City Stallions, or the Salt Lake Stallions, I wouldn't touch that. For one, you've already got Birmingham Stallions and USFL, so they won't even touch that.
Right. And I wouldn't even, like, Salt Lake to me makes more sense as a USFL city because of the weather conditions compared to an XFL city. Just remember the AAF, they played February to what was supposed to be May. You don't want to play in the cold out there. I think you like that. Some cities make more sense depending on the league. That one does only because you'd be starting in April, a few more months to warm up. But
and then
I'll let you keep going there. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
I just thought that was interesting, but yes.
And then, like I said, the XFL won't touch the Commanders because they already have a team in San Antonio. I think the Commanders, unless you move them to like Dallas Fort Worth area, call them like the Dallas Commanders or the Fort Worth Commanders, you're not going to see them come back in any shape or form. To your point, San Diego is a good spot. You had the San Diego Fleet, because I think some of the problem too is like, how do they come up with these names for the teams? And I do want to mention too, if the Washington, I think you said Generals from the 80s for USFL, if they come back,
Federals.
That's right, New Jersey Generals. If the Federals come back, can they not be green and black? That made absolutely no sense to me. I believe they were the green and black.
Yeah, they were green, black, and white back in the day. Yeah,
I remember the few videos on it that I've seen and heard people talk about. That color scheme made no sense to anybody.
It was a unique one. I don't think it blended too well. But as we've seen, like, look, the '80s uniforms, I'll be honest with you, most of them were pretty bland for the USFL at the time. It's not revolutionary uniform design for a lot of those, and I thought the modern day ones did a great job. I thought, at least like encapsulating what's old meets new. Like the Generals, they took a lot of the color scheme back in the day and they added the stars on the patches and made it snappier. The Panthers basically copied what they had years prior, and they upgraded the logos to a modern aesthetic. So if you were to say bring the Federals in, they would find a way to make it swing. I think, for example, the Federals, they use that eagle with the star logo that kind of is a swooshing effect. They'd probably put that on the helmet, but they'd upgrade it to make it look more modern day. And I think for color palette's sake, green being brought into the league, it helps. I mean, for example, the Showboats, they could have stuck them as, orange, silver, and white again. But they changed it to dark blue, gold, and white to kind of more match the city's professional scene in terms of pro sports, like the Memphis Grizzlies. And they also, I think, maybe they took some hints, but some people didn't like how much red was in the league, and they changed a team that could logically make sense to change to a different color palette. So a little more diversified. So like the Federals, at the very least, color scheme wise, it makes sense because, it diversifies the color palettes and a little more aesthetically pleasing.
I mean, yes, I like Memphis, but for obvious reasons,
I see.
I don't like their colors.
Yeah, that's fair. And some of the fans from back in the day wish they were red, silver, and white again. I've seen plenty of those guys wishing they hadn't switched to blue and gold, but I've seen a lot of praise for the blue and gold. And I think it works. It does its job. It's a pretty good looking logo. I can't wait to see what the uniforms look like because I don't think many people have seen the designs yet. I asked Brady White on my interview with him earlier this week, and he has not seen those either. So, but I think they did that as just a change to kind of fit this, kind of make the more palatable look around the league. And I think, again, they want to fit the pro scene in terms of color. Pittsburgh did it because black and gold, and the Grizzlies are in Memphis, and I think they wanted to be kind of like unified in terms of like what's a pro sport. They're a pro sport, so the city's colors they're kind of sticking with too, and it's the blues. Think about that. Memphis is very much known for its blues music. You can go with the blue aesthetic that way too. I think there's a few ways you can lean into that color and it justifies why they did it.
I mean, to your guys' point too, the whole Pittsburgh's colors make me want to puke, so to speak. That whole narrative, from last year, it really wasn't much different. Because when I went to look up the color palette for them in the '80s, it was purple, Renaissance red, and gray and white.
Yep.
Whereas it was purple and orange. So I mean, it's not.
Right. Well, they did it. Keep in mind, the Maulers, you got to realize the Maulers only lasted one season in 1984. So, they closed shop because the USFL going into 1985 was announcing that they were going to shift to the fall and they were going to challenge. And you weren't going to win that battle in Pittsburgh. So they closed up shop. And so they brought them back to kind of, because they wanted to bring the original color palettes to all the teams. And they did it that way, but they listened to feedback. And, the city's black and gold, stick with black and gold. So they listen to feedback, they switched. It's been a very popular change. And, I think they're going to, in terms of, I think, fan engagement, it seems like they're on a good start to not only rebrand that color scheme, but also I think to get away from some of the muck from last year with some of the public opinion of the Maulers in the USFL. I know that, some hot mics and Pizzagate aside, I think that helps kind of move a little bit beyond that too. And it's a clean slate move as well. Clean slate for the Horton family that's now running it.
So, oh my gosh.
That's all good.
Oh my God. I really forget what my next question was going to be.
Well, I mean, I guess, let me think here. I got a question for you then.
Okay.
So I guess you got my answers for championship and playoffs. Who do you have?
Oh, that's right. I kind of skimmed over that. Not on purpose.
Oh, that's all good.
So I think, at least going into the season, I think you're probably right with the South, 100%. I think we're going to see something like the Gamblers sitting at 5-5 at the 3 spot, maybe. And Memphis sitting at the 4 with like maybe 4-6. If that's even possible. As far as the North, let's see, you went Philly and Michigan. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to say, as much as I like Philadelphia, and they're one of my favorite top teams of the league, I think something's going to happen in the series that's going to screw Philadelphia over with New Jersey. And New Jersey is going to end up in there, and something magical is going to happen in Canton, and Pittsburgh is going to make the playoffs.
Okay. I mean, that's another, like I said, the competitive North. So, they're dark. Like, honestly, it's anyone's game, I think, beyond Philadelphia. So, but hey, you're saying New Jersey and Pittsburgh, that'd be a fascinating combo. That'd be a very fascinating combo indeed. Not too crazy, though. Like I said, the North's kind of all over the place. So I still buy that as a possible finish.
Yeah, I felt like it's more of not a stretch than like, I don't know, Philly and Pittsburgh or something. I mean, it's kind of hard to pick these and be like, what's going to be the one that's way far out there? Because in the North, you don't really have it. In the South, it's kind of like, it's basically run through Birmingham and New Orleans. If you want the stretch matchup, there is where you're looking at it, and it would probably be like, Birmingham and Houston, or Birmingham and Memphis, or who even knows? It could be Memphis and Houston altogether, which, I mean, I think the consensus is most likely not going to happen. Sorry, ref, but I think, yeah. And then the championship, oh, man. That's the hard thing for me, because I wouldn't mind seeing New Jersey or Pittsburgh get to the championship and possibly raise the trophy. I think New Orleans is going to have Birmingham's number, though, this time around.
Ooh, okay.
And I think New Orleans is going to make it. And the reason I didn't go with the Stars, even though that I like the Stars have been in every single USFL championship ever.
They have.
That's actually one fact that I think I may have learned from the show. I don't remember.
That was well, I mean, you might have. I know I pointed that out last year. Is that they've been in every USFL championship that has existed. The 3 in the 80s, and last year they upset the Generals to make their way over there, which is ironic because in the 80s the Generals were the team that would come in after 1983 season. They would come in, have a very good year, and then get upset in the playoffs. So it's kind of weird how that was on brand almost. Like, no joke. It's amazing how on brand that kind of was.
It is kind of funny. So I think New Orleans is going to go, and I think they'll play probably New Jersey, honestly. I mean, Pittsburgh being in there is kind of a stretch. I think that's what I want to see with New Jersey raising it all. I think New Orleans is going to be that team we see slowly take the steps to get there. I mean, last year they made the playoffs. I could see them making it this year, getting over the hump to beat Birmingham. And whether it realistically is Philly or New Jersey, you're looking at another hump that's just a little bit taller that I don't think you have what it takes to get over that hump. I think it could be next year we probably see New Orleans raise the trophy. But, I mean, yeah, because realistically it probably will be a complete rematch of last year in the semifinals at least. But, I mean, that's what I would go with.
Mm-hmm. Hey, fair enough. I don't, like I said, anything can happen. There have been teams that have made a lot of change in terms of some positions. For the Breakers, they made a lot of QB changes, and defensively they brought a lot of key people back. They have both their top receivers back in terms of Johnny Dixon and Jonathan Adams. I know there's no Sal Cannella, but still, those two were really decent options last year. So anything's possible. I guess to me, I'm valuing that you have a Stars roster that built upon itself this offseason pretty well, brought back a lot of its talent. And then the Stallions, they just brought pretty much everybody back, except maybe like a few key pieces. Their line might be the only thing that's suspect. I'm curious because they did lose one or two of their top offensive linemen, but it is possible they can, to me, make another run without a doubt.
I mean, like you said, anything's possible. I could see it both ways. Realistically, I think it's going to be rematches in the semis, and maybe New Orleans realistically still does get over the hump, but it's probably Philly and New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess to kind of close us out here, you have any final thoughts?
Just looking forward to the year, honestly. I'm telling you right now, like, it's amazing that we're going to get season 2. Training camp right around the corner. I still haven't processed that, but we are 2 weeks away. And USFL teams will be hitting the field in their respected hub cities pretty damn soon.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to season 2. Hopefully, the league continues to grow, and whether, the growth of the league causes the XFL to go under, I'm kind of okay with it right now. I mean, because, all the USFL, all the XFL has really done at this point is not leave a gap between the Super Bowl and USFL kickoff. I think maybe to a degree some of that gap is warranted. I think we're kind of seeing that on their side with attendance being what it is, TV ratings being what it is. But yeah, I'm totally, as far as what the main topic was supposed to be tonight, I'm definitely excited for the season coming up. I hope the Panthers do well. It definitely looks like it's in their favor to do better than they did last year. Baby steps, new coach. So, as long as they don't do a 2-8 again, technically you could go 3-7. I don't see them going 3-7, but you could go 3-7. It's technically improvement.
Yeah, it is. Oh yeah.
Which is funny because a lot of people are like, no, it's not. If you were 2-8 last year, an extra win is an extra win. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So where can the people find you?
Well, you can find us at many a place, especially for the USFL. I'll hype that up a lot here. At USFL Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, along with TikTok. I actually need to get another video out here pretty soon, so we'll figure that on out. You can also, be sure to subscribe to our channel at USFL Podcast on YouTube. Click the bell, builds morale as well, makes us not have you miss a video too. So yeah, check us out all those platforms. Weekly releases every Friday, and we try and sprinkle in videos at least once to twice a week beyond that too. So you always get something new to watch, and it's always going to be USFL content over there at USFL Podcast. Also, if you're curious about arena football, Inside the Walls is where it's at. Check us out on YouTube at Inside the Walls, and if you like it, subscribe and follow us for any National Arena League coverage that way too.
Definitely, because USFL Podcast gets an A+ from me. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Go deep dive into the USFL coverage. So if you want to know anything USFL, go over, check them out. Same thing with Inside the Walls. Like he mentioned, they cover strictly NAL, National Arena League, which I totally understand because it's hard to juggle two leagues for sure.
Yes.
Especially when it's, the 50-yard special, and that alone makes it a lot to cover. So A+ on both the shows. Go check them out. I totally recommend. Thanks everyone for enjoying this edition of Inside the Pylons in the Den. Thank you for coming on, Zach, and hope to have you on again at some point.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Yeah, reach out to me.
Will do. Everyone, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe to all the channels, and we'll see you next time.